Think about the person in your life who has maybe 3 real friends, doesn't reply to group chats within the hour, and somehow seems completely unbothered by it. We tend to look at people like that and assume something's missing, that they're shy or antisocial, or maybe just haven't found their people yet. But what if I told you that keeping a small circle isn't a deficiency at all? What if it's actually one of the most psychologically sophisticated things a person can do? Let's dig into why some people build a fortress instead of a festival, and why that might say more about their wisdom than their wounds. We live in a culture that quietly worships quantity: more followers, more contacts, more group chats, more people showing up to your birthday. Somewhere along the way, social abundance became a proxy for self-worth, as if the size of your contact list is a scoreboard for how loved you are. But your brain doesn't actually work that way, and this is where psychology politely disagrees with culture. Robin Dunbar, the anthropologist behind what's now called Dunbar's number, found that human beings are cognitively wired to maintain around 150 stable relationships max, and within that, only about 5 people we'd call truly close. 5. Not 50, not 500, 5. So when someone keeps their circle small, they're not failing at friendship. They're actually just living closer to what the human brain was designed for in the first place. Here's the part that fascinates me. Emotional intimacy has a cost. And I don't mean that cynically, I mean it literally, biologically. Every close relationship you maintain requires cognitive and emotional bandwidth, remembering someone's stresses, showing up during their hard weeks, holding space for their contradictions, forgiving their bad days. That's not free. It's not supposed to be free. And people who intuitively understand this start making a very deliberate trade. Instead of spreading that emotional currency thin across dozens of surface-level connections, they concentrate it into a few relationships deep enough to actually hold weight. Think of it like this. Would you rather have 20 inches of water spread across a wide, shallow pool, or that same amount of water poured into a deep well you can actually drink from during a drought? Small circle people are choosing the well. There's also something quietly protective happening underneath this pattern, something rooted in how we process social threat. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish much between physical danger and social danger. Being excluded, judged, or emotionally hurt lights up almost the same alarm systems in the brain as physical pain does. There's actual neuroimaging research on this, showing that social rejection activates regions like the anterior cingulate cortex, the same area involved in the distress of physical injury. So for someone who has been burned before, betrayed by a friend, exhausted by performative socializing, drained by people who took more than they gave, narrowing the circle isn't isolation, it's regulation. It's the nervous system saying, we survived that and we're not doing it on a mass scale again. I think this is where a lot of misunderstanding creeps in, because we often mistake selectivity for coldness. But if you actually watch someone who keeps a small circle, you'll notice they're rarely cold to the people inside it. In fact, they tend to be intensely loyal, deeply attentive, almost fiercely present, because all that emotional energy that others distribute across 100 acquaintances gets funneled into just a handful of people. It's the difference between a wide, thin spotlight and a narrow, blinding beam. One lights up a whole room dimly, the other can set something on fire.
There's also a quieter psychological thread here, something almost philosophical if you sit with it long enough. The question of identity and how much of ourselves we're willing to perform for approval. Big social circles often demand a kind of code switching, a slightly different version of you for every group, every dynamic, every unspoken expectation. Small circles, on the other hand, tend to allow something rarer: consistency. The version of you at 2 a.m. venting about your fears looks a lot like the version of you laughing over coffee, because there's no audience large enough to perform for. Psychologists sometimes call this authentic self-continuity, and it turns out people with higher self-continuity, meaning their private self and public self are closely aligned, tend to report significantly higher life satisfaction. So maybe the small circle isn't a wall keeping people out. Maybe it's a boundary protecting the version of you that doesn't have to shapeshift to be loved. None of this means small circle people don't crave connection or that solitude and depth are always chosen from a place of strength. Sometimes it does come from real hurt, from social anxiety, from a history that made trust feel dangerous. That part deserves compassion, not romanticizing. But there's a difference between isolating out of fear and curating out of self-knowledge. And often, the people we assume are missing out have actually just stopped mistaking noise for nourishment. So, if you're someone who's ever felt a flicker of guilt for not wanting a huge friend group, for preferring one long, real conversation over 5 shallow ones, I want you to sit with this thought for a second. Maybe you're not bad at socializing. Maybe you've just quietly figured out something a lot of people spend decades on learning. That connection was never supposed to be about volume, it was always about depth. Your small circle might not be a limitation at all. It might be the clearest sign that you already know what actually matters. If this made you rethink your own circle or made you appreciate the few people who've stuck around, let me know in the comments who came to mind while you were watching this. And if you want more of these honest looks into human psychology, stay a while because there's always more beneath the surface than we're taught to notice.